George Washington. The name itself is huge. First president, victorious general, the father of his country. He's this figure who seems like he was literally carved from marble. But what if we could peel back that myth? Well, in this explainer, that's exactly what we're going to do, using his own words to try and find the real person. Right, this is the face we all know. It's on our money, it's on giant memorials, it's all over our history books. It's the image of the stoic, unshakable leader. This is the Washington of legend, a true icon of American identity. And this legend wasn't just made up later on. Even people who knew him, like Thomas Jefferson, talked about him in these almost superhuman terms. Jefferson said his character was perfect. That's the foundation of the whole myth, this idea of a flawless figure.
But come on, nobody's perfect, right? So the real question has to be, who is the actual man hiding underneath that monument? And to find him, we've got to listen to his own voice, the one we find in his letters, his speeches, and his private thoughts.
So, where do we even begin this journey to find the real guy? Well, it doesn't start with unshakable confidence, like you might think. No, it starts with profound, almost crippling self-doubt. Now, you really have to think about the context here. This wasn't something he whispered to a friend in private. Washington said this publicly to the Continental Congress, right at the moment they made him commander-in-chief. He's basically standing up and telling them all, I honestly don't think I'm the right person for this job.
And listen, if that was his public stance, his private letters show an anxiety that was even deeper. He writes about these sleepless nights, about the unbelievable personal burden he felt. This wasn't some leader who was sure of victory. This was a man who was absolutely haunted by the possibility of failure, with the weight of a whole new nation on his shoulders.
So how does that anxious, doubting man become the determined leader who actually wins a war? Well, the answer is found in the war itself. The incredible pressure of the revolution is what forged his character and his most important principles. So central to his whole philosophy was this idea of the citizen soldier. For Washington, the army was never, ever the main goal. It was there to serve the new republic and its people. He believed a soldier's ultimate loyalty had to be to the civilian government, which, by the way, was a pretty radical idea at a time when military leaders often just became dictators.
And from that core belief, he basically built his army on three key pillars. First, absolute discipline, which he called the soul of an army. Second, this stark, unwavering resolve. There was simply no other option but to conquer or die. And third, a deep personal faith that a divine providence was guiding their whole struggle. And boy, were these principles put to the test. Just look at the Newburgh conspiracy. The war was almost over, and his officers, unpaid and absolutely furious with Congress, were seriously threatening a military coup. Washington confronts them, arguing that if they turn on their own government, they'd betray everything they just fought for. He warned they could be led, quote, like sheep to the slaughter.
And this is where we see his true power. After his big speech, he pulls out a letter to read. He kind of fumbles for a second and then says this. It was a simple, totally unplanned moment of vulnerability. But in that second, his officers didn't see a general anymore. They saw a man who had sacrificed everything right alongside them. The conspiracy just melted away, and the Republic was saved. Okay, so the war is won, but Washington's focus just shifts from commanding an army to building a nation. And his vision for that nation came with some powerful warnings that honestly still echo today.
In his farewell address, he basically argued that a republic can't survive on laws alone. It needs a moral foundation. For him, being a good person wasn't just a private thing. He saw it as an indispensable support for the country's success and happiness.
And then he left the country with this famous three-part warning. First, beware the spirit of party, what we would just call political factions, which he was convinced would destroy national unity. Second, avoid having deep-seated hatreds or intense loyalties to other nations. And third, do not get tangled up in permanent foreign alliances that could drag the young country into other people's war. So finally, to really get the man, we have to look at the parts that don't fit that perfect myth. The contradictions, the hidden passions, and even the outright lies that have shaped how we see him. And here it is, the great central contradiction of his life, slavery. He was a slave owner his entire adult life, and yet he spoke with incredible power about liberty. And as this quote shows, he privately said he was against the slave trade, calling it traffic in the human species. He was a man trapped in a system he both benefited from and claimed to hate. And that whole marble statue image, the stoic, emotionless guy, yeah, that was a carefully constructed facade.
Jefferson himself said that Washington had a seriously powerful temper. He was this intensely passionate man who spent his whole life trying to keep that passion under control. And when it did break free, Jefferson said his anger was most tremendous.
So what about his most famous words? You know, the ones everybody knows. Well, the truth is, he never actually said them. The whole story about the cherry tree and this quote about God in the Bible, they were both just invented by biographers decades after he died.
Yeah, they're complete fabrications. They were created to polish his legend. It seems a young, insecure nation needed a simple moral superhero more than it needed a complex man. It just goes to show how deliberately that myth of the perfect Washington was built.
So when you strip everything else away, what did he truly believe in the end? This quote from his first inaugural address really gets to the heart of it. He didn't see America as some finished product or a guaranteed success. He saw it as an experiment, a really fragile and precious one, with the future of liberty itself hanging in the balance.
And that really leaves us with this final thought. A myth can be perfect, but a man is always flawed, passionate, and full of contradictions. So does knowing the real, human Washington, the one who doubted himself, lost his temper, and struggled with his own principles, make the American experiment he helped start seem more fragile? Or does it make it, and what he accomplished, all the more remarkable?